People seem to be pretty mixed about Disney's 2015 live-action remake of Cinderella. The consensus was that the original animated film got the title character right but everything else wrong, and this live-action remake everything else right but Cinderella wrong. So I'm here to do a whole character analysis about her and show you that there is plenty of character to her as well as the emotional growth that she goes through. Now throughout the movie, there is one main thing about Cinderella that grows: her good spirit. This is the thing that is the most affected and changes throughout the movie. At the beginning, we see her happy life with her family. Everything is all smiley and sweet. Her spirit is high as the clouds in the sky. But then, slowly, she starts losing things. Starting with her mother, who during her last moments with Ella, tells her to have courage and be kind. This is obviously something that recurs throughout the film, but it's actually not as easy as it may seem. So her father tells her that he wants to remarry, and she's very happy about it. She'll get to have another mother, her father will be happy again, and they'll all be a complete family. Right before she meets them, she whispers to herself, "Have courage and be kind." This is important not just for the sake of her own spirit, but for keeping the spirit of her own mother alive as well. After she meets them, however, she gives her father a reassuring look, but once to herself, she looks nervous and uncertain. She's unsure about these new family members and struggles with courage at this point. Soon her father has to leave on business, and she tells him to only bring home a branch, the first branch that he sees on his travels, merely because he will be the one to bring it back. Which is all she really wants, for him to return. So after he leaves, she starts doing chores around the house. The stepmother and stepsisters start mistreating her gradually. But her spirit is still in a high place, as shown when she playfully sneaks a taste from the food being cooked in the kitchen. And then, she learns that she's just lost her father. The only piece of him left is the branch that he promised. She sinks down to the floor in sadness, representing the state her good spirit has sunk to. Not just this, but because of her father's passing, she loses all her friends from the house staff as well. So she does more and more stuff around the house for her stepmother and sisters. They say in the movie that it's not necessarily out of kindness, but to distract herself from the pain that she feels. Another possible interpretation could be that she's doing it all to further win the love and respect of her stepmother and sisters, so she can be part of a family again. But as shown in another scene, they dismiss her completely from eating breakfast with them. So she leaves to have breakfast on her own, but clumsily drops the dishes in her hands. She's devastated at this point because she feels like she will never be part of a family again. She even looks into a coffee pot at a disfigured reflection of herself. This is one of the points that the movie tries to make, that when others treat you as less than what you are, the worst thing about it is when you yourself start to believe it. Anyone who has ever been a victim of domestic abuse knows how hard it is to feel trapped in a place of hardship. So Ella reaches a breaking point and she runs away on her horse. Now, one complaint the film has gotten is, why doesn't she just leave? Well, it could possibly be argued that this was an attempt at leaving. She then stumbles upon the prince, and they have a very watchable talk together. They talk not exactly like it's love at first sight, but as two people who share a lot in common. After he leaves, her spirit has been renewed, and she heads back with courage and kindness in her heart once again. In another scene, it's brought up again why she doesn't just leave when they treat her like they do. Now, the excuse that she gives is because it's her home, and it's the place where she lived with her parents, so she must cherish it and take care of it the best she can. People have disputed this, though, saying that she eventually leaves in the end anyway. I'll get to that when we come to the end, but the reason that I think is, where would she go? She has nowhere to go even if she did leave, and she couldn't possibly take care of herself on her own. So it's soon announced that there will be a royal ball and that everyone is invited. Her stepmother and sisters forbid her from getting a dress for herself, so she makes one. Or rather, fixes up her mother's dress. I love this little moment in particular because I love scenes in movies that show what a main character is capable of. In this case, sewing, cooking, cleaning, and even speaking French as an added bonus. The dress itself is very important, not just because it represents the memory of her dead mother, but also because it represents her good spirit as well, as symbolized when her stepmother and stepsisters tear it apart and say, "You shall not go to the ball." Ella runs away and cries in devastation. Some people had a problem with this scene as well. We've already had a moment where she breaks down, why do we need another one? Well, this scene is very important for a different reason. For one, this is another point that the movie tries to make, that even when you are kind to people, there are things in the world that can mistreat you, even rob you of that. For another thing, this scene shows that she thinks she's lost all sense of kindness at this point and realizing she has no courage. Her good spirit is broken, as shown when she says, "I don't believe anymore." But then her fairy godmother shows up and asks for a cup of milk, and says a cup of milk may seem like nothing on its own, but kindness makes it everything. Ella giving her a cup of milk shows that even though she thinks she's lost any sense of kindness within her, fairy godmother shows what she's truly capable of, thus reminding her of the goodness still within her. The fairy godmother is a terrific character, not just because of the terrific performance by Helena Bonham Carter, but also because she literally represents everything that Ella has ever believed in, particularly magic. She gives her everything: a coach, horses, footmen, a coachman, but most of all, she renews her spirit, symbolized when she fixes up her mother's dress into a beautiful gown and says, "You shall go to the ball." You could even say that the fairy godmother is the embodiment of Ella's good spirit. Ella goes to the ball and dances with the prince. Afterwards, they share a good bonding moment together. This scene is also important because it shows how much more they have in common. He didn't tell her who he was before because he's afraid she might treat him differently if she knew. The thing is, though, that when he asks her who she is, she hesitates because she's afraid of the exact same thing, showing how she still struggles with courage, especially since she immediately runs away when the clock tolls midnight. Eventually, the town crier announces that the prince wants to marry her. She's in high spirits now because she thinks she can finally leave and be part of a family again. She rushes home to get the glass slipper, but finds her stepmother already there holding it. This scene is extremely important, not just because it helps develop the stepmother, but also because it develops Ella's character as well, because the stepmother was exactly like Ella at one point. But then she too lost everything, and she became cruel as a result. She's the literal embodiment of true cynicism, whereas Cinderella is the embodiment of idealism and optimism. The stepmother orders Ella to make her head of the royal household and in charge of the prince and the kingdom. But Ella finally starts to show some courage and defies her. The stepmother obviously doesn't like this and breaks the slipper. Ella asks, "Why are you so cruel?" The stepmother replies, "Because you are young and innocent and good." This shows that the main reason she's especially cruel to Ella is because she's jealous. Ella is everything the stepmother used to be and might even wish she still was. So the stepmother locks her up in the attic. The prince orders a search for Ella while the stepmother makes a deal with the Grand Duke to hide her away so he can marry someone else and she can gain more for herself and for her daughters. So Ella is now a prisoner in her own home. What does she do? She sings and dances. Now this is something that people had a major problem with as well. The original animated Cinderella at least made an effort to try to escape, and yet this one just sings and dances. That's not very strong of a character. Well, I think you're kind of missing the point. She's lost everything at this point. Her parents, her freedom, a life with the prince, and yet she still has one thing left. The one thing that no one could ever take away from her. Because, you're right, she has no reason to be happy right now. But that's why it's so important. If she did break down and cry again, she would be doing exactly what the stepmother would have wanted. And that's just not who she is anymore. There was no fairy godmother. She thinks the prince is well beyond her reach at this point. There was absolutely nothing left to renew her spirit again. And yet, she does it all on her own this time. If that's not emotional growth for a main character, I don't know what is. So her furry little friends open the window as she sings. After her voice is heard, the stepmother reveals her and claims herself to be her mother. But Ella says, "You have never been and never will be my mother." People took issue with this as well, saying this goes against the whole have courage and be kind thing. But this isn't her being cruel, this is her showing courage, asserting herself for once, declaring her independence from the oppressor, so to speak. Her way of saying, "You have no power over me." The next move she does is a very brave choice, confronting the man she loves about who she really is. She looks into the mirror again, showing how she sees herself now, and we hear her mother's last words one more time. When she talks to the prince, she calls herself Cinderella now, a name originally called to her by her stepsisters, but now she wears it as a badge of honor, because it doesn't affect her anymore. As soon as the slipper is put on, they are about to leave when she has 3 final words for her stepmother. "I forgive you." This drives home another point the movie makes, not just have courage and be kind, but have courage to be kind, even to those who may be very undeserving of it, to not stoop as low as those who mistreat you. It's never your fault if they treat you badly. Always have a good heart, be patient, and you will be rewarded. She's a new person now, courageous and headstrong with a heart of gold. Going back to the argument of why Cinderella never left, since she leaves at this point anyway, a possible interpretation is that the house no longer belonged to her parents. It was now a place of hardship and misery, so anyone would want to leave in that situation. However, what I choose to believe is this. She stayed in the house before because it was all she had left of her parents. In other words, she was still holding on to grief and sorrow and missed them too much. But when she leaves at the end, it's as if she was finally moving on and got over her parents' death. She doesn't need the house anymore. Instead, she and the prince hang portraits of their parents next to each other to always remember them and keep them close. She has a new home to love, and she's her own person now. One thing we have to acknowledge about this movie is that even though the movie is called Cinderella, it's actually just as much of an ensemble piece as well. Yes, it is mostly about Cinderella herself, but everyone in this movie has their own story that they're going through. The thing to remember is, this movie is about the effect that Cinderella has on everyone. The stepmother is jealous of Cinderella, so she tries to put her in a lower position of servitude and submission. When she meets the prince, she convinces him to think for himself and not adhere to the status quo. When she has a brief moment with the king, she instantly convinces him to take it easy on his son and let him follow his heart. All having to do with the recurring theme of how your actions and personality can and do have an effect on those around you. In closing, I think this movie is very touching. I think there is plenty of character to Cinderella, and it really touches on something that I firmly believe in, not just in movies but in life, to see the world not necessarily for what it is, but what it truly could be. It's okay to be optimistic, and never lose your sense of childhood wonder. Count your blessings even when it seems that you have nothing, and never, ever let the world take away your good spirit. So that was my analysis on my favorite live-action remake from Disney. If you like this video, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe to the J-Man.